Most women meet their soulmates under romantic lighting, perhaps bumping into each other at a coffee shop or locking eyes across a crowded ballroom. I met mine while wearing mud-caked Crocs, buzzing on 3 cups of stale coffee, and pointing a Red Ryder BB gun at his rear end. I didn't know the massive black wolf digging up my prize-winning hydrangeas was the alpha king of the Western Territories. I just knew he was a pest, destroying 3 months of hard work. So, I pulled the trigger. I expected a yelp. I didn't expect him to turn into a naked billionaire who looked at the bruise on his hip, smirked at me, and decided right then and there that he was moving in. Welcome back to Raven's Library. It is good to have the pack gathered again. Before we step into today's story, I want to do a quick roll call. Where in the world are you listening from right now? And more importantly, is there a furry reading buddy snoozing next to you? Let me know in the comments. I love seeing who's in our pack. Quick reminder, if you enjoy these narrations and want to help keep the library lights on, consider hitting that join button to become a member. It directly supports the channel and gets you early access to every new release. Now get comfortable. It's time to see what happens when a tomato farmer takes on a wolf king. Chapter 1. I didn't wait for the beast to turn around. I didn't hesitate. I just squeezed the trigger. Pfft. The sound was pathetic. A compressed puff of air that wouldn't scare a squirrel, let alone a predator the size of a ride-on lawnmower. But the plastic pellet flew true, sailing through the morning mist and making a distinct, satisfying thwack against the animal's flank. I expected the wolf to yelp. I expected it to scramble over the picket fence and vanish into the blackwood forest, learning a valuable lesson about the sanctity of my organic vegetable patch. That is not what happened. The wolf didn't run. He froze. He let out a long, weary sigh, a sound entirely too human for a canine, and stood up on his hind legs. My brain stalled. Wolves don't stand up. They definitely don't start losing fur and growing skin in a shimmering, mercury-like cascade of magic that defies every law of physics I learned in high school. The massive paws elongated into hands, the snout retracted into a sharp, aristocratic jawline. The fur dissolved into broad, sun-kissed shoulders, and a chest that looked like it had been carved out of marble by a very lonely, very horny sculptor. In 3 seconds, the wolf was gone. Standing in his place, right in the middle of my crushed petunias, was a man. A naked man. A stark, naked, 6'4" wall of muscle who looked entirely too comfortable with the morning breeze. He didn't cover himself. He didn't scream. He simply twisted his torso to look over his shoulder, examining the small red mark blooming on his left glute. He rubbed it with a grimace, then turned his gaze to me. His eyes were gold, not hazel, not yellow, molten, predatory gold. "Nice aim," he drawled, his voice a deep baritone that vibrated in the soles of my rubber gardening shoes. "But you're pulling to the left. If you were aiming for the kidney, you missed." I stood on my porch, the toy gun still raised, my mouth hanging open. My brain was frantically trying to file this under hallucination caused by fertilizer fumes. But the man was too solid, and the destruction to my garden was too real. "I wasn't aiming for a kidney," I managed to choke out, my grip tightening on the plastic stock of the BB gun. "I was aiming for the rump. It's the fleshy part. Teaches a lesson without causing permanent damage." The man blinked. The corner of his mouth twitched upward. He stepped over a row of heirloom carrots, crushing a seedling with his bare foot. "Hey!" I snapped, the gardener in me overriding the survival instinct. "Watch where you're stepping. That's an early girl tomato plant. It's worth more than your dignity, apparently." He stopped, looking down at the crushed green stalk, then back at me. He looked genuinely baffled. "You're worried about the vegetable?" "It's a fruit," I corrected automatically. "And yes, you were digging up my hydrangeas. I have a sign on the gate, 'No trespassing. Violators will be composted.' Can you not read, or do you just choose to ignore property laws when you're running around naked in the woods?" The man chuckled. It was a dark, dangerous sound. He walked closer, right up to the edge of the porch railing. He smelled like rain, pine needles, and expensive cologne, which was odd for someone who had just been a dog. "I read the sign," he said, leaning his forearms on the railing, putting his face level with mine. The golden eyes scanned my face, lingering on my messy bun and the smudge of dirt on my cheek. "I just didn't think it applied to me." "It applies to everyone," I said, refusing to back down even though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "I don't care if you're a lost hiker, a nudist colony escapee, or a werewolf. Get off my land." He tilted his head, his amusement growing. "You know what I am?" "I live next to the Blackwood," I scoffed. "I see weird stuff all the time. Usually, you guys stay in the trees. You're the first one rude enough to landscape my flower bed." He stared at me for a long beat, the silence stretching thin and tight. He wasn't looking at me like I was prey. He was looking at me like I was a riddle he wanted to solve. "I'm Rane," he said simply, as if that name was supposed to mean something, as if the clouds should part and a choir should sing. "I'm calling the police," I countered. "Go ahead." Rane smiled, showing teeth that were still slightly too sharp. "Sheriff Miller works for me. So does the mayor. Actually," he gestured vaguely to the woods, the road, and my farmhouse, "I own the bank that holds your mortgage, Tess." My stomach dropped. I hadn't told him my name. "How do you know who I am?" I whispered. Rane reached out, snatching the barrel of the BB gun before I could blink. He didn't take it from me. He just lowered it gently, his fingers brushing against mine. His skin was scorching hot. "I know everything that belongs to me," he said softly. "And as of 5 minutes ago, I think I've decided to add you to the list." Chapter 2. I yanked my hand back as if I'd touched a hot stove. "Excuse me? Add me to what list? If it's a list of people you plan to annoy until they sell, you can scribble my name out right now. I have a shotgun, and unlike the BB gun, it doesn't make a pft sound." That was a lie. I didn't own a shotgun. I owned a very aggressive weed whacker and a healthy sense of boundaries. But Rane didn't need to know that. Rane didn't flinch at the threat. He just straightened up, standing tall in all his unclothed glory, looking completely unbothered by the fact that he was naked on a stranger's porch at 7 in the morning. "You need to read the fine print on your mortgage, Tess," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Clause 14, Section B. The lender reserves the right to on-site inspection of the property at any time to ensure the asset is being maintained." "The asset," I spat, gesturing to the sprawling rows of vegetables, "is practically an Eden. I work 14 hours a day to keep this place running, and you—" I was cut off by the sound of tires crunching on gravel. I looked up to see a convoy of 3 matte black SUVs tearing down my driveway, kicking up dust clouds that were definitely going to settle on my squash blossoms. They screeched to a halt in a formation that screamed government raid. "Great," I groaned, dropping my forehead into my hand. You called the feds. I'm going to jail for shooting a billionaire in the butt. Not the feds, Rane corrected. My assistant. I need a suit. The doors of the SUVs flew open. 4 men in dark sunglasses jumped out, forming a perimeter. A woman in a sharp pencil skirt stepped out of the middle vehicle, holding a garment bag and a pair of Italian leather shoes. She didn't even blink at the sight of her naked boss. She marched up the porch steps, stepped around me like I was a potted plant, and handed the bag to Rane. The charcoal 3-piece, sir, she said, her voice monotone. And I rescheduled your 10 o'clock with the Japanese delegation. Thank you, Mara, Rane said. He unzipped the bag and began to dress right there on the porch. I turned around, facing the wall of the house, my face heating up. You could go inside to change, or behind a tree. Have you no shame? None, he replied cheerfully. I heard the rustle of fabric, the zip of a fly, and the snap of a belt buckle. You can turn around now. I turned back. The transformation was unfair. The wild, dirt-smeared wolfman was gone. In his place stood a titan of industry. The charcoal suit fit him like a second skin, accentuating shoulders that were far too broad for a boardroom. He looked like money. He looked like power. He looked like trouble. Now, Rane said, buttoning his jacket and checking his cuffs. Your inspection. Since I'm already here, and since my hip is currently throbbing thanks to your sharpshooting skills, I've decided to stay. Stay? I repeated, the word tasting like vinegar. Stay for lunch? No, I don't have enough bread. Stay for the week, he corrected. He pointed a manicured finger at the front lawn, right next to my weeping willow. Mara, have the team set up the glamping unit, the deluxe one. I want the espresso machine and the high thread count sheets. You cannot camp in my yard, I shouted, waving the BB gun for emphasis. This is private property. Rane stepped closer, invading my personal space, until all I could see was the gold flecks in his eyes. He smelled even better in the suit. It was infuriating. It's mortgaged property, he whispered, his voice dropping an octave, sending a shiver down my spine that had absolutely no business being there. And until you pay off that loan, Tess, you have a landlord, and your landlord is injured. Unless you'd prefer I stay in your guest room? I looked at his smug face. I looked at the team of men already unloading a tent that was bigger than my living room. The yard, I gritted out. You stay in the yard. If you touch my tomatoes, I shoot the other cheek. Rane grinned, a predator who had just cornered his meal. I look forward to it. By the next morning, my front lawn looked less like a farm and more like a backstage pass to Coachella. The tent Rane had pitched was a canvas monstrosity with actual windows, a portable AC unit, and a small deck. I watched from my kitchen window as a caterer, delivered a tray of pastries to the tent flap. I grabbed my coffee, slammed the back door, and marched out to the greenhouse. I had work to do. Aphids didn't care if the alpha king was glamping in the petunias. They just wanted to eat my kale. I was knee-deep in soil, tying up the heavy vines of my prize-winning beefsteak tomatoes, when a shadow fell over me. You work too hard, a voice rumbled. I didn't look up. Some of us don't have billions of dollars to inherit, Rane. We have to grow our income. Literally. Rane leaned against the doorframe of the greenhouse. He was wearing a crisp white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms that were corded with muscle. He held a porcelain cup of coffee that probably cost more than my tractor. It wasn't inherited, he said casually. I built my empire. Real estate, tech, pack logistics. I'm very good at acquiring things I want. The weight of his gaze was heavy on the back of my neck. He wasn't looking at the plants. Good for you, I said, snapping a sucker branch off the vine. Go acquire a hobby that doesn't involve loitering in my workspace. I'm bored, he admitted, stepping inside. The greenhouse was humid and smelled of damp earth and green leaves. He seemed to fill the space, sucking the oxygen out of the room. There's no Wi-Fi out here, and the birds are loud. That's called nature. It happens outside the city. I stood up, wiping my dirty hands on my overalls. I picked up a basket of freshly harvested tomatoes. They were beautiful, deep red, heavy, and perfect. Rane's eyes tracked the movement. He took a step closer, eyeing the basket. Those look decent. Decent, I scoffed. These are blue ribbon winners. They taste like sunshine and victory. I'll take one, he said, reaching out a hand. I slapped his hand away. No. He looked at his hand, then at me, genuinely shocked. Excuse me? This isn't a buffet, Your Majesty. This is inventory. I sell these at the farmer's market on Saturday. If you want one, you buy one. Rane rolled his eyes, reaching into his back pocket. He pulled out a sleek black titanium card. Fine. Put it on the card. I stared at the card. I don't have a card reader. I take cash. $2. Cash? He looked at the credit card as if it had betrayed him. Who carries cash? I haven't touched paper money since the 90s. Then you don't get a tomato, I said, hoisting the basket onto my hip and moving to walk past him. He blocked my path. He wasn't being aggressive, just immovable, a solid wall of stubborn mail. I want the tomato, Tess. And I want you to move your tent, but we don't always get what we want, I retorted, tilting my chin up to meet his glare. He looked frustratingly handsome when he was annoyed. His jaw clenched. I can wire you $1 million right now for the whole basket. I don't want your charity, I said quietly, and I don't want your millions. I want $2. It's the principle. You can't just take things because you're strong and rich. Rane stared at me for a long moment. The amusement in his eyes shifted into something else. Respect, maybe? Or maybe just hunger. Fine. He growled softly. I don't have cash. How else can I pay? I looked him up and down. The immaculate shirt, the expensive slacks, the soft hands that clearly hadn't done a day of manual labor in decades. A wicked idea formed in my mind. Well, I said, pointing toward the south field, I have an old oak stump that needs removing. The tractor is broken, and it's too deep for me to dig out alone. Rane followed my finger. He looked at the dirt. He looked at his shoes. You want me to dig? He asked, arching a brow. I want you to sweat, I corrected. Dig up the stump, and you get the tomato. Deal? Rane handed me his coffee cup. A slow, dangerous grin spread across his face. Hold this, he said, and prepare to be impressed. Chapter 4. I expected him to ask for gloves. I expected him to ask for a shovel. I expected him to call one of the bodyguards lurking by the SUVs to do it for him. Instead, Rane walked out to the south field, stopped in front of the massive, rotting oak stump, and began to unbutton his shirt. I stood on the porch, hugging the tomato basket, telling myself I wasn't going to watch. I was a professional agriculturalist. I had seen plenty of shirtless men before. But I hadn't seen this. Rane tossed the white shirt onto the grass. His back was a landscape of muscle, trapezius, deltoids, lats, moving under bronzed skin like coiled snakes. He didn't ask for a tool. He walked up to the stump, which had been the bane of my existence for 3 years, and crouched down. Wolf strength, I muttered to myself. It's cheating. He dug his fingers into the earth around the roots. Dirt flew. He wasn't digging like a human. He was digging like the predator he was. Within minutes, he had exposed the main root ball. He stood up, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and wrapped his arms around the trunk. With a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the air and settled straight into my ovaries, he heaved. Crack! The sound was like a gunshot. The stump, roots and all, was ripped from the earth in a shower of soil and rocks. Rane tossed the 200-pound chunk of wood aside as if it were a toothpick. He turned to face me. He was glistening. Sweat ran down the center of his chest, navigating the ridges of his abs. His pants were ruined, stained with mud. He looked feral. He looked magnificent. I walked down the steps, my mouth dry. I held out the single red tomato. "Payment rendered," I said, my voice sounding a little breathless. Rane didn't take the tomato immediately. He stepped closer, invading my space again. The heat radiating off him was intense. He smelled of turned earth and raw power. "I don't just want the tomato," he murmured, leaning down. He took the fruit from my hand, his fingers brushing my palm, leaving streaks of dirt on my skin. He brought the tomato to his lips and took a bite, eating it like an apple. Juice ran down his chin. He didn't wipe it away. He watched my eyes track the droplet. "It's good," he said, his voice rough. "Sweet." I grabbed the garden hose lying in the grass. "You're dirty," I said, trying to regain some semblance of control. "You can't go back into your fancy tent looking like a swamp monster." "Clean me up then," he challenged, spreading his arms wide. I turned the nozzle on. A jet of cold water hit his chest. Most men would have flinched. Rane just laughed, shaking his wet hair like a dog, sending droplets flying everywhere. He stepped into the spray, walking toward me. "Rane, stop!" I warned, backing up until my back hit the wooden fence. He didn't stop. He closed the distance, heedless of the water soaking his trousers. He planted a hand on the fence next to my head, boxing me in. He was soaking wet, half naked, and looking at me like I was the only water source in a desert. "You aim better with a gun than a hose," he whispered, leaning in. His face was inches from mine. I could feel his breath on my lips. The playfulness was gone. The air between us crackled with static electricity. My heart hammered against my ribs. I dropped the hose. "Rane." He tilted his head, his gaze dropping to my mouth. "Tell me to stop, Tess. Tell me to leave, and I will." I opened my mouth, but I didn't know what I was going to say. Stop? Don't stop? Before I could decide, a shrill, piercing sound cut through the heavy air. Rane froze. A muscle in his jaw ticked. He pulled back, reaching into his wet pocket to retrieve a waterproof phone. He looked at the screen, and the heat in his eyes instantly froze into ice. "The Council," he said, his voice flat and cold. He looked at me, the moment shattered. "I have to take this." He turned and walked away, leaving me pressed against the fence, wet, breathless, and staring at a half-eaten tomato in the dirt. Chapter 5. The ringing phone was like a bucket of ice water dumped over the fire in my veins. Rane answered it with a sharp, "This better be good." His back turned to me. The playful, feral creature who had just ripped a tree stump out of the ground was gone. In his place was the CEO, the Alpha King, the man who owned half the state. I bent down and picked up the garden hose, twisting the nozzle off.
My hands were shaking. "Get a grip, Tess," I scolded myself. "He's a billionaire werewolf. You're a tomato farmer. He was flirting because he's bored, not because he's interested." "I don't care about the optics." Rane snapped into the phone, pacing toward his tent. "Handle it. That's why I pay you." He disappeared inside the canvas palace without looking back. I spent the next hour furiously weeding the carrots, taking my frustration out on the dandelion roots. I was just about to head inside for lunch when I heard a distinct whirring sound. It sounded like a giant mosquito. I looked up, shielding my eyes against the sun. Hovering about 50 feet above my barn was a drone. A sleek black camera drone with a lens the size of a soda can pointed directly at Rane's tent. "Oh no," I muttered. Before I could grab a rock, the tent flap flew open. Rane stormed out, still shirtless but wearing dry pants. He didn't look up. He just moved. He blurred, literally blurred, launching himself off the porch railing. He leaped into the air, defying gravity, and snatched the drone out of the sky with one hand. He landed in a crouch, the plastic casing crunching under his grip. He ripped the memory card out and crushed the drone into a ball of scrap metal. "Who?" I asked, running over. "Tabloids," Rane growled, tossing the wreckage into my compost bin. "They found me." His phone pinged. Then mine pinged. Then, simultaneously, the phones of all 4 bodyguards by the SUVs started ringing. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had a Google alert set for Blackwood property values, but this wasn't about real estate. It was a push notification from the Wolf Street Journal. Headline: Alpha King slumming it? Rane caught shirtless on mystery farm. Is the throne being held hostage by a peasant? Below the headline was a blurry, zoomed-in photo taken from the bushes. It showed Rane soaking wet, leaning over me against the fence. From the angle, it looked scandalous. It looked like we were moments away from tearing each other's clothes off. "Oh my God," I whispered. "They think we're having an affair?" Rane finished, reading over my shoulder. "No, they think I've lost my mind. Look at the caption." I read it. "Sources say the king has abandoned his duties to play farmer with a human woman. Council considers vote of no confidence." "I'm ruining you," I said, the blood draining from my face. "They think you're unstable because you're hanging out with me." Rane looked at the phone, then at me. His expression was unreadable. "Tess, stop." "No, look at this. They're calling me a mystery peasant. They're going to swarm this place. My farm, my privacy." I started hyperventilating. I marched into the house, grabbed the first suitcase I could find, an old duffel bag I used for gym clothes, and ran back outside. I shoved the bag into his chest. "Pack," I ordered. "Get your stuff. Get your tent. Go back to your palace. You need to leave before you ruin my harvest and your reputation." Rane didn't take the bag. It fell to the ground with a thud. "You're kicking me out?" he asked quietly. "Because of a headline?" "I'm kicking you out because you don't belong here," I shouted, waving my arms at the dirt, the chickens, the mess. "Look around, Rane. This is real life. It's dirt and sweat and bugs. You're a king. You don't fit." Rane looked at the farm. Then he looked at me. His eyes were hard. "You think I care about them?" He pointed at the destroyed drone. "You think I care about a council of old men who haven't hunted in 50 years?
You should, I yelled. You're their leader. I am their king, he corrected, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. I don't answer to them, and I certainly don't let a tabloid decide where I sleep. He stepped over the duffel bag, closing the distance between us. Pick up the bag, Tess. No. Pick it up. Chapter 6. I didn't pick up the bag. I crossed my arms and glared at him. Or what? You'll huff and puff and blow my house down? Rane let out a short, sharp laugh. He shook his head, looking up at the sky as if asking the moon for patience. Then he bent down, picked up the duffel bag, and walked right past me. He walked up the porch steps, opened my front door, and tossed the bag inside onto my living room couch. What are you doing? I demanded, following him. That was for you to leave. I'm not leaving, he said calmly, walking into my kitchen. He opened the fridge and started rummaging around. In fact, I'm upgrading. The tent is compromised. The press knows where it is. So, for security reasons, I'll be sleeping on your couch. You absolutely will not! Clause 14, Section C. He mumbled around an apple he'd just stolen from the fruit bowl. In the event of a security breach, the lender may secure the primary residence. Stop quoting the mortgage! I screamed. I don't care about the contract. I care about my life. You are bringing a circus to my doorstep. Why are you doing this? Why are you so obsessed with staying here? Rane stopped chewing. He set the apple down on the counter. The playfulness vanished. He turned to me, leaning his hips against the sink. The kitchen suddenly felt very small. You want to know why? He asked softly. Yes, tell me. Is it the land? Is there oil under the pumpkins? What is it? It's you, he said. I froze. What? For 300 years, he said, taking a step toward me. Everyone who looks at me sees a title. They see a bank account. They see power. When you looked at me yesterday, you saw a pest. You shot me. He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You have no idea how refreshing that is. You are the first person in a century who hasn't tried to sell me something or sleep with me to get ahead. You just wanted me off your hydrangeas. So I'm a novelty? I asked, hurt stinging my chest. I'm entertainment? No, Rane said. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face but not touching. You're real. Everything in my world is fake, Tess. The smiles, the alliances, the food, it's all processed. This, he gestured to the kitchen, to me. This is real. He picked up the apple again and took a bite. Besides, he added casually, his golden eyes locking onto mine, wolves don't leave their mates, Tess, even the grumpy ones with BB guns. The world stopped. The clock on the wall kept ticking, the refrigerator hummed, but inside my head there was only silence. Mate? I whispered. The word felt heavy, ancient. Rane didn't elaborate. He didn't take it back. He just watched me, waiting for the penny to drop. You're joking, I stammered. Like mate as in buddy? Pal? Rane smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You know exactly what I mean. Before I could process the bomb he had just dropped, the front door rattled. A heavy, authoritative knock echoed through the house. Rane sighed. And that would be the fun police. Chapter 7. I opened the door to find 3 men standing on my porch. They were dressed in suits that cost more than my entire farm. They looked at my porch swing and peeling paint with undisguised disgust.
"We are here for the king," the man in the front said.
He had gray hair and a nose that looked like it had been broken and reset badly.
"Step aside, human."
"Excuse me?" I bristled. "This is my house. You don't get to order me around."
"We are the High Council," the man sneered. "Your property rights are irrelevant when the crown is involved. Move."
He reached out to shove past me. A hand caught his wrist in midair. Rane appeared behind me. He didn't look like the playful gardener anymore. He looked terrifying. His eyes were glowing a brilliant, unmistakable gold. A low growl vibrated in his chest, a sound so deep I felt it in my teeth.
"Touch her,"
Rane said, his voice a quiet, deadly rumble.
"And you lose the hand, Silas."
The councilman, Silas, went pale. He yanked his hand back.
"Your Majesty, we didn't know you were occupied."
"I am not occupied."
Rane stepped out onto the porch, positioning himself between me and them.
"I am residing. There is a difference."
"Sir,"
the second councilman spoke up, looking nervous. "The photos, the press, it's a disaster. The stocks are dropping. You must return to the capital immediately. We have a statement prepared denying this."
He gestured vaguely at me. "Denying what?" Rane asked, crossing his arms. "That I am inspecting an investment? That you are consorting with a commoner?" Silas spat the word out. "It looks weak, Rane. The king does not roll in the mud with humans." I felt the shame burn my cheeks. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to tell them to get off my porch, but Rane beat me to it. "You're right," Rane said. My heart shattered. I looked at his back, betraying nothing. He was agreeing with them? "The king does not roll in the mud," Rane continued. He looked down at Silas's polished shoes, which were currently standing on a small green sprout poking through the porch slats, a volunteer tomato plant I'd been meaning to pot. "However," Rane said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream, "the king also knows the value of growth." "You are standing on her plant, Silas." Silas looked down. "It's a weed." "It is life," Rane roared. The sound cracked the air like thunder. The three men flinched violently. "Move your foot and apologize."
"Apologize?" Silas stammered. "To the girl?"
"To the plant," Rane snarled, "and then to the girl. Do it, or I strip you of your rank right here." Silas looked at Rane. He looked at the glowing eyes, the bared teeth. He swallowed hard. He stepped back, lifting his foot off the crushed seedling.
"I apologize," Silas mumbled, looking at the floorboards. "Louder," Rane commanded. "I apologize," Silas barked. He looked at me, hate burning in his eyes. "To you as well, miss." "Leave." Rane pointed to the SUVs. "Tell the press I am handling a delicate negotiation, and if I see another drone, I will personally dismantle the council building."
Brick by brick. The men scrambled back to their cars like scolded puppies. They peeled out of the driveway, leaving a cloud of dust. Rane watched them go, his chest heaving. The golden glow faded from his eyes, replaced by exhaustion. He turned to me. I stared at him. He had just threatened his own government over a tomato sprout. "You," I started, my voice shaky. "You defended the plant." "It was a metaphor," Rane muttered, rubbing his temples. "I hate those guys." He turned to go back inside, but stopped. He looked at me, his expression softening. "They won't bother you again,"
he promised. I don't care about them, I said, stepping closer. Rane, you called me your mate. He went still. He looked down at me, the vulnerability stark on his face. I did. And then you agreed with them, I whispered.
You said you're right. I said they were right about the mud, Rane corrected. I didn't say they were right about you. Thunder rumbled overhead. A heavy raindrop hit my cheek, then another. The sky opened up, pouring rain down on us. We should go inside, Rane said, not moving. Yeah, I breathed, looking at his wet shirt clinging to his chest. We should. Neither of us moved. The rain soaked us to the bone, washing away the dust, the anger, and the distance. Tess, he said, his voice raw. I'm not leaving. I know, I said, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted him to. Chapter 8. The storm didn't just break, it detonated. The sky turned a bruised purple, and the rain came down in sheets so thick I could barely see the barn 50 feet away. Inside, Rane barked, grabbing my arm. He didn't drag me. He guided me, shielding my head with his other hand as if his palm could stop a deluge. We tumbled into the kitchen, dripping wet and breathing hard. I slammed the door against the wind. The house was dark. The power had gone out. Great, I shivered, hugging myself. No lights, no heat. You have a fireplace, Rane noted, his night vision clearly better than mine. He moved through the dark room with an eerie, predatory grace, avoiding the coffee table I banged my shin on daily. Do you have wood? By the hearth, I chattered, my teeth clicking. But the matches are in the drawer and I can't see. Snap. A small flame erupted from Rane's fingertip. I froze, water dripping from my nose. You're a firebender too? It's a lighter, Tess, he deadpanned, holding up a sleek silver Zippo. I'm a billionaire, not a wizard. He knelt by the fireplace. Within minutes, a roaring fire cast a warm, flickering orange glow across the living room. The shadows danced on the walls, making the cozy space feel intimate. Too intimate. You're shivering, Rane said. He stood up and began to unbutton his wet shirt. Whoa, easy, I said, backing up until my hips hit the kitchen island. We are not doing the huddle for warmth trope. I have blankets. I'm wet, he stated simply, peeling the soaked fabric off his skin. The firelight licked across his chest, highlighting every ridge of muscle, every scar. He tossed the shirt onto a chair. And so are you. He looked at me. My thin cotton t-shirt was plastered to my skin. I was wearing a sports bra, but it didn't leave much to the imagination. I'll change upstairs, I squeaked, bolting for the staircase. When I came back down wearing dry sweats and a hoodie, Rane was in the kitchen. He had rolled up his sleeves. Wait, he wasn't wearing sleeves. He was shirtless. Right, focus, Tess. He was rummaging through my pantry by the light of the fire. You have potatoes, he announced, and onions, and that steak I saw in the freezer. I was saving that ribeye for my birthday, I protested. It's thawing now, he said. I'm cooking. You cook? I raised an eyebrow. I thought you had people for that. My mother taught me, he said quietly. He found a knife and began chopping the potatoes. His movements were precise, rhythmic. Chop, chop, chop. Before she died, she made sure I knew how to feed myself. She said a king who can't cook is just a man waiting to starve. I walked over to the island, watching him. It was domestic. It was weirdly normal. The Alpha King, half naked in my kitchen, dicing russets. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "About your mom." He paused, the knife hovering over a potato. "It was a long time ago, but thank you." We cooked in silence. I held the flashlight while he seared the steak in my cast-iron skillet over the open fire in the living room. The smell of rosemary and garlic filled the air, replacing the scent of rain. We ate on the rug in front of the hearth. No plates, just forks and the skillet between us. It was the best steak I'd ever had. "So," I said, twirling a piece of potato on my fork, "the mate thing. You dropped that bomb, and then we got interrupted by the Three Stooges." Rane stopped chewing. He looked at the fire. "It's not a bomb, Tess. It's biology. My wolf recognizes you. It knows you're the other half." "And what if I don't want to be a half?" I asked, terrified of the answer. "I like being a whole." He turned to me, the firelight reflected in his gold eyes. "That's why you're perfect. You don't need me. I don't want a dependent, Tess. I want a partner." He reached out, his hand large and warm, and covered mine on the floor. "I won't force it," he promised. "I'll wait. I have eternity." "I don't have eternity," I whispered. "I have a mortgage and a harvest season." "Then I'll help with the harvest," he smiled. "I'm excellent at pulling weeds." We fell asleep like that, him on the rug, me on the couch, his hand still covering mine. It was peaceful, until the morning brought a different kind of storm. Chapter 9. I woke up to the sound of a helicopter, not a drone, a full-sized Sikh white chopper landing in my pasture, sending my cows into a panic. "Oh, come on," I groaned, sitting up. Rane was already awake, standing by the window, staring at the aircraft. His back was stiff. "Who is it now?" I asked, rubbing sleep from my eyes. "The National Guard?" "Worse," Rane muttered. "Vesper." "Who is Vesper?" "Lady Vesper," he corrected, turning to grab his shirt. "My ex, sort of. The council's top pick for queen." I looked out the window. A woman was stepping out of the helicopter. She was stunning. Tall, platinum blonde hair perfectly coiffed despite the rotor wash, wearing a white pantsuit that looked like it repelled dirt by sheer force of will. She looked like an angel, a corporate shark angel. "She looks clean," I said, suddenly conscious of my frizzy hair and sweatpants. "She's a viper," Rane warned. "Stay here. I'll deal with her." "Not a chance," I said, grabbing my boots. "My pasture, my cows, I'm coming." We met her at the fence. Vesper smiled when she saw Rane, a dazzling, practiced expression. "Rane, darling," she called out, her voice musical. "We were so worried. The news said you were having a breakdown." She reached for him, but he sidestepped her embrace. "I'm fine, Vesper. What are you doing here?" "I brought the merger documents," she said, holding up a leather briefcase. "And I wanted to meet your little friend." She turned her gaze to me. The smile didn't falter, but the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Her eyes, icy blue, scanned me from head to toe, lingering on my muddy boots. "You must be Tess," she said. "The gardener." "Farmer," I corrected. "Of course," she laughed lightly. "How quaint. It must be so grounding, playing in the dirt." "Vesper," Rane warned, his voice low. "I'm just being polite," she protested innocently. She opened her briefcase on a fence post. "Here, sign these, darling. It's the annexation papers for the Southern Territories." While Rane read the document,
Vesper took a step closer to me. She lowered her voice so only I could hear. "He looks tired, doesn't he?" she whispered. "This life doesn't suit him. The dirt, the smell. He's a king, Tess. He belongs in a palace, not a petting zoo." "He seems happy enough," I shot back. "He's bored," she corrected. "He's playing a game. He does this every few decades, finds a stray, plays house for a week, and then remembers who he is." She reached into her purse and pulled out a photo. She slipped it into my hand. "That was the last one," she said with a pitying smile. "Cindy. Sweet girl. Waitress. He bought her a diner when he left. I wonder what he'll buy you. A tractor?" I looked at the photo. It was grainy, old. It showed Rane, younger, laughing, with his arm around a brunette woman in a diner uniform. He looked at her the same way he looked at me. My stomach churned. "Rane!" Vesper called out. "Are we done? We have a gala to plan." Rane looked up, signing the paper. "I'm not going to the gala." "Oh, but you have to," Vesper said, looking at me with triumph in her eyes. "Unless you want everyone to think the rumors are true, that you've been bewitched by a human and lost your mind." She turned to me. "You wouldn't want to be the reason he loses his throne, would you, Tess?" Chapter 10. Vesper left in a whirlwind of rotor wash and expensive perfume. Rane watched the helicopter disappear, then turned to me with a relieved sigh. "Sorry about her," he said. "She's persistent." I didn't smile. I was clutching the photo in my pocket so hard it crinkled. "Is it true?" I asked. "Is what true?" "Cindy," I said, pulling the photo out. "The waitress. Did you play house with her too?" Rane froze. He looked at the photo and his face paled. "Where did you get that?" "Vesper gave it to me. She said you do this every few decades. You get bored, you find a stray, you have your fun, and then you pay them off and leave." "Tess, that's not— Did you buy her a diner?" I demanded. He hesitated. "Yes, but—" "Oh my God!" I laughed, a harsh, stinging sound. "You did! I'm just the next episode in the Undercover Boss reality show you're running." "No!" Rane stepped forward, reaching for me. "Cindy was 50 years ago. She wasn't my mate. We were friends. I helped her because she was in trouble. It wasn't like this." "It looks exactly like this," I yelled, stepping back. "Rich guy swoops in, saves the poor girl, feels good about himself. I don't want a tractor, Rane. I don't want your pity." "It's not pity," he roared, frustration cracking his voice. "It's love. I love you." The silence that followed was deafening. He looked shocked that he'd said it. I looked horrified. "You don't even know me," I whispered. "You've been here 3 days. You love the idea of me. You love that I shot you. You love the game." I walked to the gate and threw it open. "Leave," I said, my voice shaking. "Take your tent. Take your suit. Go back to Vesper. She's clean. She fits. I have tomatoes to pick." "Tess, don't do this," Rane pleaded. "Vesper is manipulating you. She wants you to push me away." "Well, it worked," I said, tears pricking my eyes. "Because she's right. You're a king. I'm just a farmer. Go rule something." I turned and ran into the house, locking the door behind me. I slid down the wood, burying my face in my knees. I waited for him to bang on the door, to yell, to break it down. But there was only silence.
After an hour, I stood up and looked out the window. The tent was gone. The yard was empty. He had listened. He left. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt like someone had scooped out my insides with a melon baller. I went to the kitchen to make tea, trying to stop my hands from shaking. I reached for a mug and knocked over a piece of paper on the counter. It was a note. Rane must have left it while I was sleeping. I know you're scared. I know you think I'm playing. I'm not. I'll prove it. Turn on the TV tonight. I stared at the note. My hand reached for the remote. I turned on the news. Every channel was broadcasting live from the Capitol. Breaking news. King Rane calls emergency press conference. Rumors swirl of abdication. I gasped. He wasn't going to. He wouldn't. On the screen, Rane walked up to a podium. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing the flannel shirt I had lent him when his clothes were wet. He looked directly into the camera.
I have an announcement,
he said, his voice steel.
and I'm only going to say this once.
Chapter 11. I stood in my kitchen, clutching the remote so hard the plastic creaked. On the screen, Rane looked like a titan in flannel, out of place against the polished marble of the press room, yet commanding every inch of it.
I have been accused,
Rane began, his voice rumbling through the television speakers,
of neglecting my duties, of losing my mind, of being compromised by a human.
The flashes of cameras were blinding, a strobe light of scrutiny. Rane didn't blink.
The truth is, he continued, looking directly into the lens, as if he could see me standing in my farmhouse amidst my unwashed dishes. I have never been more sane. For 300 years, I have served the crown. I have expanded our territories, balanced the budget, and kept the peace. But a king without a heart is just a bureaucrat.
He paused. The room held its breath.
I am not abdicating, he declared.
A ripple of shock went through the press corps.
But I am making a change. The annual Moonlight Gala is tomorrow night. Traditionally, this is where the king dances with the council's chosen candidates. He smirked, that dangerous, wicked smirk I knew too well. This year, I will only dance with one woman, if she will have me. If she doesn't show, then I will dance alone, and I will continue to dance alone until the stars burn out. He walked off the stage. No questions, just a mic drop heard around the world. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I sent a car. It's outside. The dress is in the back. Please. S. I walked to the window. A sleek black limousine was idling in my driveway, right next to my tractor. I looked at my reflection in the window. Messy hair, tear-stained cheeks, dirt under my fingernails. I can't do this, I whispered to the empty room. I'm a farmer. I belong here. But then I looked at the note on the counter. I'll prove it.
He had gone on national television in my flannel shirt. He had basically told the world to shove it. If I didn't go, Vesper won. If I didn't go, I was admitting I wasn't good enough. I marched upstairs. I scrubbed the dirt from my skin until I glowed. I tamed my hair into something resembling elegant waves. I didn't put on the dress in the car. I brought it inside. I unzipped the garment bag. I expected white, or pastel pink, something soft and submissive. It was red, deep blood red silk, a dress that screamed power, a dress that said, I am not a victim, I am the danger. I slipped it on. It fit perfectly. It had pockets. Of course he knew I needed pockets. I walked out the front door. The driver, a burly wolf in a suit, opened the door for me. "To the gala, miss?" he asked respectfully. I looked back at my farm, at the hydrangeas, at the spot where I shot the king in the butt. "To the gala," I said, sliding into the leather seat. "And step on it. I have a date with a wolf." Chapter 12. The city was a different planet. Skyscrapers made of glass and steel pierced the night sky. The Moonlight Gala was being held at the Royal Opera House, a building so ornate it looked like a wedding cake made of marble. As we pulled up to the curb, the noise hit me first, the roar of the crowd, the shouting of paparazzi. "Ready, miss?" the driver asked, eyeing the chaotic scene in the rearview mirror. "No," I admitted, my hands shaking in my lap. "But let's do it anyway." The door opened. I stepped out onto the red carpet. Flashbulbs exploded. It was disorienting, like staring into the sun. Who is she? Is that the human? Look at the dress! I kept my head high, channeling every ounce of stubbornness I used when hagging over tomato prices. I walked up the stairs, ignoring the microphones shoved in my face. At the top of the stairs, standing under the massive golden archway, was Rane. He was back in a tuxedo, black velvet this time, but he looked restless. He was scanning the arrivals, his face tight with worry. Then he saw me. The worry vanished. His eyes widened. He took a step forward, ignoring protocol, ignoring the guards. "Tess," he breathed when I reached him. He looked me up and down, his gaze lingering on the red silk. "You came. You wore my flannel on TV," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I figured I owed you a dance." He reached out and took my hand. His grip was firm, grounding. "You look lethal. Red suits you." "It has pockets," I whispered, showing him. He laughed, a genuine, joyful sound that cut through the stuffy atmosphere. "Of course it does." "Shall we?" He offered his arm. I took it. We turned to face the ballroom doors. Inside, the room was silent. Hundreds of the wealthiest, most powerful shifters in the world stopped talking as we entered. The air was thick with judgment. I felt like a lamb walking into a slaughterhouse. But Rane didn't flinch. He walked me through the crowd like I was a queen. He didn't introduce me as Tess the farmer. He introduced me as Tess, my guest. We made it to the center of the room. I reached for a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, needing liquid courage. "Don't drink that," a voice purred behind me. I turned. Lady Vesper was standing there. She looked flawless in silver, surrounded by a group of sycophants. "Why not?" I asked, holding the glass. "Because," Vesper smiled, her eyes glittering with malice, "you'll need your wits about you. We have a surprise." She signaled to the band. The music stopped. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vesper announced, her voice carrying effortlessly across the hall. "Before the king dances, we thought it would be fun to share a little story. A story about how our dear Tess really met His Majesty." She gestured to a large screen behind the stage, usually used for donor names. An image appeared. It was a police report and a photo of the BB gun. "Assault with a weapon," Vesper read theatrically, "endangering the crown. Tell us, Tess, did you think you could shoot your way into the royal family?" The crowd gasped. The whisper started instantly. Assassin. Crazy. Dangerous. I froze. I looked at Rane. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at Vesper. And he looked ready to kill. Chapter 13. The room spun. The accusations hung in the air like toxic smoke. She shot him? Is she an insurgent? Security, why is she here? Vesper basked in the chaos. She had framed the narrative perfectly. I wasn't the quirky girl who made a mistake. I was a violent threat who had ensnared the king. Rane, I whispered, tugging on his sleeve. I should go. Stay, he commanded, his voice low and vibrating with a growl. He didn't let go of my hand. In fact, he pulled me closer, tucking me against his side. Ladies and gentlemen, Vesper continued, pacing the stage like a prosecutor, we cannot allow a human with a history of violence to stand next to our king. It is a safety risk. It is an insult to the pack. She pointed a manicured finger at me. Security, please escort this woman out of the building. For her own safety, of course. 2 massive guards stepped forward. They looked hesitant, glancing between Vesper and Rane. Don't touch her, Rane said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The alpha command in his voice hit the room like a physical wave. The guards stopped dead in their tracks. The champagne glasses rattled on the tables. Rane released my hand and stepped forward. He walked toward the stage, toward Vesper. The crowd parted instantly, terrified of the aura radiating off him. He walked up the steps. Vesper looked triumphant, thinking he was coming to side with her, to restore order. Thank you, Rane, she beamed. I knew you would see reason. We can't have... Rane walked past her. He went to the podium. He leaned into the microphone. Turn it off, he said. The image of the police report vanished from the screen. You want the story? Rane asked the crowd. Vesper told you half of it. She told you Tess shot me. That is true. A gasp rippled through the room. Vesper smirked. What she didn't tell you, Rane continued, his voice softening, is why. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out something small and held it up. It was the plastic yellow BB pellet. She didn't shoot me because I was the king. She didn't know who I was. She shot me because I was a wolf digging up her hydrangeas. A few nervous chuckles broke out. She defended her home, Rane said, looking at me across the room. She stood on her porch, 5 feet nothing, and faced down a 200-pound predator because he was messing with her flowers. She didn't cower. She didn't beg. She fired. He turned to Vesper. You call that dangerous. I call it magnificent. He walked back down the stairs, straight to me. He ignored the stunning elites, the politicians, the cameras. He stopped in front of me. Most people in this room fear me, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. They bow because they have to. Tess shot me because I was being annoying. He took my hand again. I don't need a queen who fears me, he declared. I need a queen who keeps me in line. And judging by her aim, she's the only one qualified. The silence was total. Vesper's mouth was opening and closing like a fish. Rane smiled at me, that boyish, mischievous grin returning. Now, he said, I believe this is the part where we dance. I don't know how to waltz, I whispered, tears blurring my vision. Good, Rane said, pulling me onto the floor. Neither do I. Let's just step on their feet. As the music swelled and the king of the wolves spun the tomato farmer in circles, I saw Vesper storming off the stage. She wasn't done. And as we spun past the heavy velvet curtains near the exit, I saw something else. Silas, the councilman. He wasn't watching us. He was watching the guards. And he gave a signal. The side doors burst open. Not police, not security. Hunters. Men in tactical gear, carrying rifles that were definitely not BB guns. "Rane!" I screamed, shoving him back just as the first shot shattered the chandelier above our heads. Chapter 14. I shoved Rane back, expecting bullets. I expected blood. I braced myself for the impact. Instead, a massive weighted net exploded from a canister, sailing over the heads of the screaming elite and crashing down onto the dance floor, right where Rane had been standing a second ago. "Contain him!" Vesper shrieked from the sidelines, pointing a shaking finger at Rane. "He's gone feral! The human has broken his mind! Secure the king before he hurts anyone!" The men in tactical gear weren't assassins. They were the shifter control unit. They were armed with tranquilizer rifles and containment poles, the kind used for rabid strays. "Don't shoot!" I yelled, throwing my hands up. "Are you insane? He's wearing a tuxedo."
He is compromised.
Silas, the councilman, barked from behind the wall of guards.
He just threatened a high-ranking noble. Protocol 7. If the alpha becomes unstable, neutralize and sedate.
Rane didn't look unstable. He looked like a statue carved out of pure, concentrated rage. He stepped in front of me, using his body as a shield. He didn't shift. He didn't roar. He just stood there, adjusting his cuffs.
Protocol 7,
Rane said, his voice terrifyingly calm amidst the chaos.
Applies to sick animals, Silas, not your king. You aren't yourself,
Vesper cried, playing the victim perfectly. She wiped a fake tear.
Look at you, protecting that peasant while threatening your own court. She's bewitched you. It's the only explanation.
The control unit hesitated. They looked at the king, who was currently glaring a hole through their leader, and then at Vesper, who was screaming orders.
"Take the shot," Vesper commanded, "for the good of the pack."
The lead officer raised his tranquilizer rifle.
"No."
I didn't think. I didn't strategize. I just moved. I ducked under Rane's arm and stepped in front of him. I stood between the king of the Western Territories and the barrel of the gun.
"Tess, move,"
Rane growled, his hand gripping my shoulder to pull me back. "No," I snapped, shaking him off. I planted my feet in my heels, smoothing the red silk over my hips. I stared down the barrel of the rifle. "You want to shoot him?" I yelled at the officer. "You have to shoot me first, and let me tell you, I have very litigious lawyers. Well, I have a cousin who's a paralegal, but she's very aggressive." The room went dead silent. The absurdity of it. A human woman in a ball gown threatening a SWAT team with a paralegal cousin seemed to short-circuit the tension. "Miss," the officer said, lowering his weapon slightly. "Step aside. That is a dangerous predator." "He is not a predator!" I shouted, pointing a finger at Rane's chest. "He is a landlord. He's a gardener. He digs up tree stumps and eats tomatoes and complains about the Wi-Fi. He isn't rabid. He's just annoyed because you interrupted our dance." I turned to the crowd. "Is this how you treat your leader? The second he does something you don't like, the second he dates someone outside your little country club, you call the dog catcher?" I laughed, and it was a harsh sound. "You people are supposed to be wolves, powerful, loyal, but you look like a bunch of scared sheep to me." "She's controlling him," Vesper shouted, though her voice wavered. "She's using a spell." "It's not a spell, Vesper," Rane said. He stepped up beside me. He didn't push me behind him this time. He stood with me, shoulder to shoulder. Equals. He looked at the officer. Put the gun down, Sergeant, or I will feed it to you, piece by piece. Chapter 15. The sergeant looked at Vesper. Then he looked at Rane. Then he looked at me, fierce and shaking in my red dress. He lowered the rifle. Then he clicked the safety on. Stand down, the sergeant ordered his team. The king is cogent. What? Vesper screeched. He is threatening us! Do your job! My job is to protect the crown, the sergeant said flatly. Not to help you stage a coup, Lady Vesper. The word hung in the air. Coup. Rane stepped forward. The crowd, which had been murmuring in fear, now watched with rapt attention. He didn't look at the soldiers. He walked straight toward Vesper. She backed up, hitting the edge of the stage. Rane, darling, I was trying to help. Help? Rane asked softly. He reached out and plucked the microphone from the stand. You called a containment team on your king. Rane addressed the room, his voice amplified, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. You tried to frame an innocent woman. You tried to humiliate her. And when that didn't work, you tried to drug me. He looked at the shifter council, huddled in the corner. Is this the leadership you support? Silas swallowed hard. He looked at Vesper, who was now trembling. He made a calculation. Lady Vesper acted alone, Silas announced quickly. The council had no knowledge of the containment order. Liar! Vesper screamed. You signed the order! Regardless, Rane interrupted, his voice booming. It ends now. He turned to me. He extended his hand. I walked over to him, my legs feeling like jelly now that the adrenaline was fading. Vespers said Tess was dangerous, Rane said, looking at me with a warmth that melted my knees. She was right. She is dangerous. She's the only person in this room brave enough to stand in front of a gun to save a monster. He turned back to the crowd. You all want a queen who looks the part, who smiles and waves and follows protocol. I don't. He grabbed the BB pellet he had shown earlier. Wait, no, he reached into his other pocket. He pulled out something else. It was the tomato, the one he had bought for $5,000, or rather for digging up a stump. He had kept it. It was slightly bruised now, but unmistakably a tomato. This is what she cares about, Rane said, holding up the fruit like it was the crown jewels. Life, growth, hard work. While you all plot for power, she plots for harvest. He tossed the tomato to Silas. The councilman fumbled, but caught it. Eat it, Silas, Rane commanded. It's the best thing you'll ever taste. Then, Rane turned his back on them. He turned his back on Vesper, on the council, on the press. He faced me. You saved me, he whispered, loud enough only for me to hear. I saved myself, I corrected, trying to stop my hands from shaking. I didn't want to date a guy in a straitjacket. Rane smiled. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Tess, he said, I have one question. If it's about the tomato, I have more at home. It's not about the tomato. Chapter 16. The room was silent. Even the paparazzi had stopped flashing their cameras, sensing that history was happening. Rane took a step back. He adjusted his jacket. And then, in front of the entire shifter aristocracy, the king of the Western Territories sank down. He didn't bow. He dropped to one knee. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Kings didn't kneel. alphas didn't kneel. Rane looked up at me, his eyes shining with absolute devotion.
I am not asking for your hand in marriage, he said clearly. That would be too easy. And I know you'd say no because you haven't harvested the corn yet. I let out a wet, choked laugh. The corn comes in September. I am asking for a job, Rane said. A job? I repeated. I am asking to be your partner, he said. Your guard dog, your heavy lifter, your pest control. He took my hand and pressed his forehead against my knuckles. It was a gesture of total submission, a wolf baring his neck. I have spent 300 years being a king, he murmured. I am tired of ruling. I want to serve. I want to serve you.
If you will have me. You want to work on the farm? I asked, skepticism warring with hope. I want to build a life where I don't have to wear a suit, he said. And I want to wake up every morning and argue with you about the price of produce. He looked up. Tess, will you let me come home? I looked at him. I looked at the man who had ripped a stump out of the ground for me, the man who had faced down an army for me. I looked at Vesper, who was being escorted out by security. I looked at the council, who looked terrified. I realized then that he wasn't joking. He was offering me the only thing he had that was real, his freedom. Okay, I whispered. Okay, he asked. Okay, I said louder, but you're on probation, and you have to fix the gate you broke. Rane laughed. He stood up and pulled me into his arms, lifting me off the ground. He spun me around, burying his face in my neck. Deal, he growled against my skin. He set me down and turned to the crowd. The gala is over, he announced. Go home. The king has crops to tend. He grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the exit. We ran. We ran past the shocked elites, past the guards, past the cameras. We burst out of the opera house and into the cool night air. The limo was waiting, but Rane ignored it. Run? He asked, his eyes flashing gold. In heels? I challenged. He didn't answer. He just scooped me up, bridal style. Hold on, he warned. He took off down the street, moving with supernatural speed, leaving the city and the crown and the expectations behind in a blur of lights. Where are we going? I laughed, the wind whipping my hair. Home, he said. But first, I need to make a stop. A stop? It's midnight. I know, he grinned, looking down at me. But I realized I never actually paid you the $2 for that tomato. Rane! Hush. He kissed my forehead. We have a debt to settle, and I intend to pay interest. We turned a corner into a dark alley, and he set me down against the brick wall. The adrenaline from the gun, the speech, and the run crashed into something else entirely. The debt, he whispered, his hands finding the waist of my red dress, is very high. Chapter 17. $2. I managed to gasp, my hands tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. The interest rate on that must be predatory. Extortionate, Rane growled. He didn't give me a chance to argue the math. He crashed his lips onto mine, and the world narrowed down to the rough brick at my back, the cold night air, and the inferno pressing against my front. This wasn't the tentative, careful kiss from the barn. This was possession. This was a man who had spent 300 years starving, finally sitting down to a feast. His hands roamed over the red silk, mapping every curve, every shiver. He kissed me like he was trying to breathe for me. I kissed him back with everything I had. All the fear from the gala, all the anger at Vesper, all the confusion, pouring it into him until my knees gave out. He caught me, his thigh pressing between mine to hold me up. "Tess," he murmured against my mouth, his voice wrecked. "I am going to ruin you for anyone else. You know that, right?" "You already did," I admitted, breathless. "Who else is going to dig up stumps in a three-piece suit?" He chuckled, a dark vibration against my chest. He pulled back slightly, his forehead resting on mine. His eyes were blown wide, the gold irises swirling. "I can't do this here," he said, looking around the grimy alleyway. "You deserve a bed. You deserve candles. You deserve not a dumpster." "I don't care about the candles," I whispered. "I do," he said firmly. He scooped me up again. "I want to do this right. I want to memorize you in the light." A long black car pulled up to the curb with a discreet honk. The driver, the same burly wolf from before, rolled down the window, looking resolutely forward. "Home, sir?" "Home," Rane said. He carried me into the car, settling me on his lap like I was precious cargo. The drive back to the farm was a blur of hushed whispers and tangled fingers. Rane didn't stop touching me. He traced the line of my jaw, the pulse in my wrist, the scar on my knuckle from a pruning shear accident. He was grounding himself. When the tires finally crunched onto the gravel of my driveway, the silence of the countryside felt like a blanket. No screaming crowds, no flashbulbs, just the crickets and the wind in the willow tree. We didn't turn on the lights. We stumbled through the front door, stripping layers as we went. His tuxedo jacket landed on the stairs. My heels were kicked off in the hallway. By the time we reached my bedroom, the red dress was a pool of silk on the floor, and Rane was unbuttoning his shirt with shaking hands. Moonlight spilled across the quilt. I stood by the bed, suddenly shy. It was one thing to banter. It was another to be bare. Rane stopped. He saw the hesitation. He walked over slowly and went to his knees again, not in a grand gesture this time, but in intimacy. He kissed my stomach. "You are beautiful," he whispered into my skin. "You are the most real thing I have ever seen." He pulled me down onto the bed. The night wasn't gentle. It was a storm. It was the clash of two stubborn, fierce creatures finally yielding. Rane worshipped me. He touched me with a reverence that made my chest ache, but he moved with a power that reminded me he was a king. And I didn't just take it. I demanded. I pulled him closer, matching his rhythm, claiming him just as hard as he claimed me. "Mine," he groaned as we went over the edge together, the word stamped into the air between us. "Mine." "Yours," I sobbed back. We collapsed into a tangle of limbs and sweat. The room was quiet again, save for our ragged breathing. Rane pulled the duvet over us, tucking me into his side like a spoon. "See," he murmured sleepily, kissing the top of my head. "No tractor necessary." I laughed, exhausted and sore and happier than I had ever been in my life. I still wouldn't say no to a new combine harvester. "Done," he whispered. I fell asleep to the sound of his heartbeat, steady and strong under my ear. I woke up cold. That was the first thing I registered. The warmth that had cocooned me all night was gone. I reached out, my hand patting the empty space beside me. The sheets were cool. "Rane," I rasped, my voice hoarse. Silence. I sat up, panic seizing my chest. The morning sun was streaming through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The room was empty. His clothes were gone. The tuxedo jacket on the stairs? Gone. The shoes in the hall? Gone. No.
I whispered.
The memory of Vesper's voice crashed into my mind.
He does this every few decades. He gets bored. He leaves. I scrambled out of bed, grabbing his flannel shirt from the floor and pulling it on. I ran downstairs, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Rane!" I yelled. The kitchen was empty. The living room was empty. I threw open the front door and ran out onto the porch. The black SUVs were gone. The tent was gone. The driveway was empty. He was gone. He had promised. He had knelt. He had made me fall in love with him, and then he had vanished the second the sun came up. I felt the tears prick my eyes. Hot, angry tears. I gripped the porch railing, ready to scream, ready to curse every wolf in existence. And then I heard a sound. Thwack. It came from the south field. Thwack. I wiped my eyes and squinted. There,
In the distance, near the pumpkin patch, was a figure. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing muddy jeans and a t-shirt that was soaked through with sweat. He was swinging something. Not a sword, not a scepter. A pickaxe. I jumped off the porch and ran. I ran past the barn, past the chicken coop, my bare feet slapping against the dirt. I skidded to a halt at the edge of the field. Rane stopped swinging. He leaned on the handle of the pickaxe, wiping his forehead with his arm. He looked at me, hair messy, covered in dirt, sweating like a sinner in church. He smiled. "Morning," he called out, breathless. "I hope you don't mind. I started early." "What?" I panted, pointing at the ground. "What are you doing?" Rane looked down at the massive trench he had dug. A straight, perfect line cutting through the hard-packed earth. "Irrigation," he said proudly. "You mentioned the water pressure was bad in the south field. I'm fixing it." I stared at him. "You didn't leave." "Leave?" He looked offended. "Tess, I have 300 acres of piping to lay before noon. I don't have time to leave." He gestured to a pile of expensive-looking PVC pipes stacked near the fence. "Also," he added, his expression turning serious, "we have a problem." "A problem?" My heart spiked again. "The council? Vesper?" "No." Rane shook his head. He pointed toward the edge of the woods. "The deer. They're back, and they brought friends." I looked. A herd of 5 deer was brazenly munching on my corn. Rane picked up something from the grass. It wasn't the pickaxe. It was my Red Ryder BB gun. He held it out to me, his golden eyes dancing with mischief. "Your shift, Your Majesty," he said. "Cover me while I dig?" Chapter 18. I stared at the BB gun in his hand. Then I looked at the herd of deer treating my cornfield like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Then I looked back at the king of the Western Territories, covered in mud, holding a toy weapon like it was Excalibur. "You're serious," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "Deadly," Rane replied. "That buck on the left gave me a dirty look. I want him gone." I took the gun. The plastic stock felt warm from his grip. I racked the slide. "Cover your ears," I ordered. Rane grinned and went back to his trench. He swung the pickaxe with a rhythmic thud, the sound of metal hitting earth harmonizing with the cicadas. I took aim at the boldest deer, the one chewing on a stalk of Silver Queen corn. Pfft! The pellet pinged off the fence post right next to the buck's ear. Startled, the herd bolted, white tails flashing as they vanished into the blackwood. "Nice shot," Rane called out without looking up. "You missed on purpose." I'm a pacifist before coffee, I retorted, walking over to him. And you have dirt on your face. Battle scars, he said, pausing to lean on the handle. He looked at me, really looked at me, with that intense golden weight that still made my knees weak even after 6 months. So, am I hired? I don't know, I teased, reaching up to wipe a smudge of soil from his cheek. The pay is terrible, the benefits are non-existent, and the boss is extremely demanding. Rane caught my hand and pressed a kiss to my palm. The boss has great legs. I'll take the job. Few months later. Order! Order in the barn! Silas banged a gavel, which was actually a wooden spoon, against a bale of hay. I stood on the loft looking down at the spectacle. The entire High Council of the Western Territories was seated on my hay bales. They were wearing Italian suits. They were sitting on itchy straw. And they looked miserable. The motion to annex the Northern Pass is on the table, Silas announced, trying to maintain dignity while picking a piece of straw off his lapel. Your Majesty, how do you vote? All eyes turned to the corner of the barn. Rane was under my tractor. Only his legs were visible. He was covered in grease. Rane! I yelled from the loft. They need a vote! There was a clanking sound, a curse, and then Rane slid out on a creeper. He sat up, wiping oil from his forehead with a rag. He looked at the councilmen, who flinched collectively. I vote yes, Rane said, on the condition that the Northern Pack agrees to supply timber for the new greenhouse. And Silas, stop banging that spoon. You're scaring the chickens. Yes, Your Majesty, Silas sighed, lowering the spoon. Meeting adjourned, Rane declared. Now get out. I have a transmission to rebuild. The councilmen scrambled up, dusting off their pants and rushing toward their limousines parked next to the pig pen. It was a routine they had gotten used to. If they wanted the king, they came to the farm. And if they came to the farm, they followed the rules. Rule number 1, don't step on the plants. Rule number 2, don't annoy Tess. Rane stood up and walked over to the ladder, climbing up to the loft to join me. He smelled like diesel and pine. It was my favorite smell in the world. They hate this, I laughed, leaning against the railing. They love it, Rane corrected, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind. It gives them something to complain about, keeps them sharp. He rested his chin on my shoulder, looking out over the property. The farm had changed. The fields were lush, the fences were mended, and the new irrigation system, courtesy of the king's manual labor, had resulted in a record-breaking harvest. But the biggest change was the sign on the front gate. It didn't say no trespassing anymore. It read, Blackwood Farm and Royal Palace. Mind the dog. You know, Rane murmured, nuzzling my neck. Vesper sent a wedding gift. Oh, God, I groaned. Is it a bomb? It's a china set. Very expensive. Very fragile. I give it a week, I said. I give it 10 minutes. Rane grinned. I was thinking we could use them for target practice. I turned in his arms to face him. He looked happy. Not the bored, arrogant mask he had worn when we met, but genuinely, deeply happy. The shadows under his eyes were gone. The tension in his shoulders had melted away. You really don't miss it? I asked softly. The galas, the city, the power? Rane looked around the dusty barn. He looked at the sunlight streaming through the slats. He looked at me. Tess, he said, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. I have the sun. I have the earth, and I have the woman who shot me in the ass. This is power." He kissed me, slow and deep, tasting of oil and promise. "Besides," he whispered against my lips, "I have a new project." "Oh no," I pulled back. "What now? Are we getting llamas?" "Better," he said, his eyes dropping to my stomach. He placed a large, warm hand over my belly. "I was thinking we might need to expand the farmhouse, add a nursery." I froze. My hand covered his. "You think?" I whispered. "My wolf knows," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He's been purring for weeks." I laughed, tears stinging my eyes. "Wolves don't purr, Rane. This one does," he insisted. He picked me up, spinning me around in the hayloft until I was dizzy with laughter. Below us, outside the barn door, a squirrel darted toward the pumpkin patch. Rane set me down. He didn't growl. He didn't roar. He reached for the Red Ryder BB gun leaning against the wall and handed it to me. "Your turn, my queen," he said. I took the gun. I racked the slide. I aimed. Pfft! The squirrel ran. The council cars drove away. The sun set over the tomatoes. And the king and his farmer lived happily, chaotically, ever after. Quick favor, don't go anywhere yet. If you thought shooting a king with a BB gun was wild, wait until you meet Cleo. She mistakes the most dangerous alpha alive for a late dishwasher and greets him by flipping a scorching hot pancake directly onto his face. Click the video on your screen right now to see if he fires her or eats it.